is now time for another interview from the backlot. This episode's guest, Nick Simon, co-writer and director of Untitled Horror Movie. Hello and welcome to the Backlot 605 podcast. Here we are today with a very special interview. I am your host, Casey Calderman, flying solo today as we are joined on this podcast today with a fellow Sioux Falls, South Dakota native, now living in Los Angeles, California. He is the writer-director of the just-released Untitled Horror Movie. No, it's not just an Untitled Horror Movie. No, that is actually the title of this movie. Nick Simon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This has been honestly a long time coming because when we
we've
first
been talking about it,
yeah, this has been something that's been in the pipeline honestly since we started. One of the first guest ideas I ever had was obviously we have to get Nick on the show because he's originally from South Dakota and now he makes movies in Los Angeles. That's kind of what we like to talk about. It's just been a long time coming, but finally glad we get the chance to sit down and chat.
It's nice to be here too, and knock on wood that I've been able to sustain a career as long as I have at this point, you know.
And let's just start right there with your career a little bit, because I love the trajectory that your career has. I mean, obviously, Untitled Horror Movie is the latest movie that you've done. And for me, you know, I told you before we started, I watched it last night with my fiance, and I do got to say, you know, I've seen your previous films. This is my favorite that you've done. You said before the show you've only made rotten movies, and I'm here to tell you, man, I like rotten movies. I don't know what that says about me, but I like.
So do I. I grew up loving rotten movies. I say rotten because of the Rotten Tomato scores, you know. But I look, you know, there's a million things that can go wrong when you're making a movie, and there's a million things that can go right. An Untitled Horror Movie happened to have. Everything happened so quickly, and everything just lined up and happened. I have no idea how. I have no idea how we got the cast. I have no idea how. I mean, Luke and I wrote that script the first draft was written in 10 days. We started writing it in mid-April of last year. We started shooting it on May 30th of last year. So like that tells you, I mean, it was like a 6-week process to get the script in shape. And then, you know, we were casting it, you know, like 2 weeks after we'd finished. I mean, it was just so quickly. Everything just happened so quickly.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because this movie is shot, you know, in the Zoom format, the Zoom concept, all on webcams and then shooting on iPhones as well. Is that obviously that's out of necessity because like you said, you shot, you know, or casted this movie in May, started shooting in May. Yeah. That's kind of, you know, in the midst of the pandemic really hitting the stride here.
Right. In the middle of it. Yeah.
So that's obviously, you know, you have to rely on that at this point, but that's a interesting concept to at least jump into and test out. I mean,
yeah, so Luke, luckily I was employed for all of 2020. So I had a job. I was writing this script with Alexander Aja for Amblin, which is like a choose your own adventure haunted house movie, which is a massive movie. You know, it's the biggest job I've ever had. It's been crazy. But also that script is like 300 pages long. So we had just turned in like a first draft of that script in April. When Luke called and just said, "Hey, you know, I have this idea for a pendulum like horror movie. It can be kind of like the Truth or Dare thing, maybe." And I was like, I don't know, we'll see. And he's like, "No, I think it could be really scary, and we could just do it. You know, we can write it just to keep going." I'm like, "All right, look, I'll write it with you, but we should try to figure out a way to shoot it now. If we can do this, we should figure out a way to shoot something now." And then I go, I don't think we should be a horror movie. I think it should be about I think it should be what we're doing right now. We're having this conversation about making this movie. It should be that. That's what the movie should be. And then he really grasped onto that, because then we knew it was going to be more of a comedy at that point. And Luke is a very smart guy, and he's a very smart writer, and he's really funny. And so we started writing it, and it happened real quickly. The first draft was out in, like I said, 10 days. I showed it to my wife, who reads all of my things, and she was, she told us it was terrible. We should start over. Like, this isn't funny. All these characters are the same, and they're really awful. I'm like, well, they should be awful, but okay. So then we started, individualizing them and making them different, and it just all happened again so quickly. And then we put together a little deck of like who our wish list, the wish list of actors we wanted in this to play these parts. And the first time in my career, we got all of the actors that were in the wish list, like they were in the deck. We put Kat McNamara, we put Claire Holt, we put those people in the deck, and they all said yes. It was just crazy. I mean, look, it was also because nobody was doing anything, and it was like, wow, it was a way to keep everybody's mind off it. But I also think that they'll say this, that they really like the script also, and which really helped. And the fact that they have the chemistry they have on screen is even more crazy, because none of them have really. I mean, a couple of them have met in person once or twice, but they've never been in the same room together. All of us have never, still to this day, have still not ever been in the same room together.
Yeah, it's crazy that you can take a negative like the pandemic was, especially in the beginning, where we're really unsure of what's going on, and instead of saying I'm just going to sit at home, do nothing, watch movies, or you guys instead are like, well, let's just make a movie then. Let's jump into it.
I think in Nicholas Meyer's book, he talks about the best art is created when you have like restrictions, and you're under constraint. So like, I think the knowing that we couldn't leave our house, knowing that we couldn't have two actors together. Like we were the first movie to be signed to officially get a green light from SAG. To do that. I think at one point there was a scene between like Luke and Kat when they were together in the same room. We had to change that so they were behind like a glass. You've seen the movie, so like he's outside and she's inside, so like they're never in the same physical space together. Like originally they were going to be in the same. He was going to go into the house. We had to change it to that. But to know that we have this, we can't see each other, we can't bring anything, and we can't shoot anything. How do we do this? So then at one point we were like experimenting, like maybe we should just shoot it on Zoom, and then we'll just edit it on Zoom. But then we ended up getting Kal Penn and Aisha Tyler and Claire Holt, all these people. So all the actors just got bigger and bigger. Claire Holt's, these people are huge actors. So we're like, okay, that's not going to work. So then we ended up bringing on DP. I worked with a bunch of times, and then we started testing different cameras and what could we send actors. We started to put together lighting kits and microphones and things that we knew that they would be able to do, and we test them out. We did more camera tests on this movie than anything I've ever done. Ultimately, at the end of the day, after trying out different cameras, we went with just the iPhone 12 Plus, because it would shoot 4K front facing and rear. So, which is crazy. We sent people iPhones, and but it wasn't. I sound like we just sent them an iPhone, and that we sent them like a big giant box of lights and all this stuff, and then they had to literally set it all up themselves. And then we used Zoom as an interface to do the scenes as live, but they were rolling their own cameras. So if you watch the film on like iTunes, it looks amazing because it doesn't look like Zoom. It's not edited, like it moves quickly. Anyway, yeah, I've totally railed off the.
No, that's all right. With that, obviously all your actors have to basically become, their own. They have to do their own lighting, shoot their own, off their own camera, do their own audio work. What was kind of their response to learning all of that stuff on the fly, pretty much?
Luke lied to them a lot. I remember when we were done. So like Luke is the one connection. I knew Tim Granaderos from a long time, and then we both knew Kat, and Luke was on a show with Kat. Actually, Luke and Kat met in the auditioning room for Girl in the Photographs. When I was casting Girl in the Photographs, at one point Kat was probably going to do the movie, and she ended up getting cast in Shadowhunters and couldn't do it. So they actually got in the room at that point, which is really crazy. So that goes back that far. And so he was the one connection to all of them. So he also kind of thought, he was the one who was like, hey, so I remember when he was talking to Emmy Raver Lampman, he was like, "So yeah, I mean, this is a script. She loved the script. So that was funny." He's like, "Yeah, it'd probably be a couple days. You're gonna, we're set up a camera and we'll roll some stuff. It'll be easy." And she's like, "Oh, great, and then, oh yeah, and there's gonna be a couple lights. Oh yeah, okay. You probably have to mic yourself too. We're gonna have to go through your house and make sure that there's no artwork that's not clear." All of a sudden became a production. So then we sent her the box, and she tells the story. She tells the story, which is hilarious, where all of a sudden, like, the box showed up in the mail one day, and it's just this giant box, and she's like, "Oh, okay." So then she put the box away, and like, I'm not gonna deal with that until I have to. But luckily, everybody was such a trooper, and we were all in it together. Nobody had ever done anything like this before, so everybody was patient. Everybody, everything worked out. Like, knock on wood, like somehow nothing, like nobody's internet went down. Like everything worked the whole time. I mean, it was, and they not only that, they all rolled their cameras and rolled their microphones, and we also had them to upload the footage onto hard drives and send them, and it was pretty intense for them.
Well, yeah, it's got to be an awesome learning experience, really, for everyone
Yeah.
involved. I mean, what was the biggest takeaway you had? Going from traditional productions of everyone's in there in person, and then going straight into Zoom shooting. You can't meet anyone. You have to shoot everything, via webcams and give direction via that way. What was the biggest learning curve you had?
I think the hardest thing for me was when as a director, I like to talk to the actors one-on-one. So like when we do a take, I'll say cut, and I'll go talk to them. I'll give them a specific note, like, but I won't do it in front of everybody. Nobody can hear. And sometimes I'll use that to play off of other actors or other things. But like for this one, it was difficult because everybody could hear everything I'd say to them, not just the cast, but like all the producers and everybody who was just on the Zoom. So like the DP, like all the other people who were, everybody was logged into the Zoom, the whole crew, so we could all see it. And then the only ones who had cameras on were the people who were like me and talking to the actors and things like that. But it was I think that was the hardest part, was for me just to, like, if I stopped and thought about that, there was like 30 people that are listening to me every time I like was trying to give a note about a performance thing. I would have like I would get in my own head and kind of lose concentration. But it was challenging. I think I also tell them that I feel like my job was also the easiest on this movie because we cast this thing so well, and they have such an insane chemistry. You feel like they've been friends for years. Even most of them have never met. They all know Luke, and that's the only connection. But like you think that they've been friends for years, but we still haven't all been together.
Yeah, this cast in this movie is incredible. Like you said, they all have such great chemistry, and especially playing 6 characters that were supposed to be on a television show together. That chemistry has to be inherent in them. Yeah. So having that portrayed on screen in this way is perfect. Like it feels like you said, they've known each other for years. Was that something they just kind of picked up on like right away? It was like, wow, I can't believe like this is just meshing so well, all these actors together.
Yeah, it's funny because I've tried to write funny, like comedy bits into my films before. I think that the script from the ground photographs was really funny. Sometimes it doesn't play that way. I think that the script with this movie, we were writing it, and we thought it was funny, but we weren't sure. And then we did a table read over Zoom, and we had all the cast. Everybody was there for doing the roles, and like right away they started doing it, and at that point we were like, oh, this is funny, this is really working. But then I think they were all feeding off of each other there in the table read, so then they knew that I guess literally Luke tells the story too, where apparently all 5 of the other actors had called him sometime after that table read and said, I'm the weak link, aren't I? I'm the weak link in this group, aren't I? And they were like terrified of that. So like, and he was like, no, what are you talking about? You guys are great. So I think that table read is really the first moment where we realize that this is great, and they get the humor, and they think it's funny, and it's going to work. And then they just took it from there. They just played off each other, and again, and Claire Holt was 6 months pregnant at the time when she shot the movie, so we're hiding her, her baby bump the whole time too. So it's pretty crazy.
with I mean, since you brought her up, Claire Holt, I mean, you talked about the casting in this movie, how you basically wrote the characters to fit the actor actress that you were trying to cast in that role. And obviously the script relies on you knowing some of these characters and actors and actresses and movies that they've been in previously, especially
Right.
Claire Holt with you know, some of the jokes out of the movie here about her starring in a
47 meters down. Yeah.
47 meters down, the highest grossing horror movie of 2017. That's a big laugh out loud moment for me. And it's one, like, you know, movie fans obviously will pick up on, and you know, casual fans might just think is, oh, that's a funny thing of this character to say, but it has a total meta aspect to it.
Oh, there's a lot of meta stuff.
Ton of it.
There's something for every one of the actors in it. Yeah, to be honest with you. And I will say this, like, all of the actors in this movie are nothing like the characters they play. Like, none. Like, Claire is the nicest human being I know, and she's she's just so funny. But they're all kind of loosely based on other actors that we do know that aren't. That we'll just leave it at that. But yeah, but they're all kind of based on people we've worked with in our past at some point.
Was the meta aspect kind of put into the script right away when you and Luke were coming up with the idea for the movie, or was it just kind of slowly evolved and, oh, maybe we should do a little bit of a meta take on this?
Well, I think we knew that when we were talking about, we talked again when we started writing the script about the pendulum, and then the story behind why he came up with the idea about there's a true story behind why he came up with the pendulum curse thing. Was he was at Gelson's, which is this kind of bougie grocery store in LA. And Luke was there one day, and there was some lady who was using a pendulum to figure out what loaf of bread she should pick. And he was like, pendulum, we should, that'd be kind of funny to have a cursed pendulum, whatever. So that's how the whole thing came about. So, like, I think when we heard that story and we knew about, then we'd also, at the time, we have a group of friends that were actors that were all kind of in lockdown, doing banana bread tutorials and things like that. We're like, man, these actors are losing their mind. We got to get them something to do. So I think that it ended up being just I don't know what it was. I think I've totally digressed again. I apologize.
No, that's right. One thing I was going to ask you, though, the movie does take place all on Zoom and, shot on the iPhones. Was the movie obviously you guys don't ever mention the pandemic. This is not supposed to take place during that at all, which I'm assuming, which I find fascinating, because I think a lot of movies that are doing sort of Zoom type of movies or shooting during the pandemic ingrained that into the story. Mm-hmm. Was that something important to you guys, of like, maybe the timeliness of this isn't what people want right now?
Yeah, it's never been in the script. We at the very early stages, we knew right away we were not going to mention pandemic. We were not going to mention COVID, especially as going back to your meta question. I don't know where I went off on the pendulum and the actors, but like the meta, once we knew we were talking about LA and actors, and they were going to be playing themselves, like playing a version of an actor in a show, then we knew it was going to be a kind of a meta thing. Also, Luke and I were discussing very early on, we're both huge Scream nerds. I mean, Wes was my mentor, and Scream is still one of my favorite films of all time. It's just a perfect movie. And we were talking like, okay, you can't really do Scream again. Like, nobody's ever going to do Scream again. But what does Scream look like today if we're stuck in lockdown and can't leave our house? And like, how do you have a horror movie that's really funny and it has a lot of pop culture things to it. It has a great cast, and like everybody, you just have that wittiness to it, and that was kind of an inspiration too, which was like the first meta, horror film of that, of that kind of caliber. So yeah, I mean, it was, I mean, I keep on answering your questions from before on this, the second part of the next question. You can edit this as a podcast.
Yeah, that's what it's for.
Okay, good.
No, I was just going to ask you because, that's immediately, as soon as you started getting into the meta stuff in the movie, I was like, oh, that was when the movie was starting to click in my head, like what this movie is. And I kind of feel that's probably how people were in 96 when Scream first came out. We're walking into a horror movie, slasher movie with Drew Barrymore. And as soon as they start asking questions on the phone of, what's your favorite scary movie and, who was the killer on Friday the 13th, it's like, oh, that's what type of movie we're in here. And your movie does the same thing too. And I was going to ask you, is that something like you've always wanted to do? Because you did work with Wes and Wes was your mentor. Is that something you always wanted to like maybe take your shot at doing a meta style of horror movie?
I didn't think it was, I mean, look, we didn't know if it was even going to work, I mean, everything on this movie, we had no idea ever if it was going to work. I mean, when we were shooting it, we were hoping it was going to work. We felt like we had good performances, but we didn't even know if the actors were recording until I got the footage back, because they had to upload all the footage to the drive. Like, we could see it on a Zoom, but that wasn't what we were using. So I mean, I always loved those movies so much, and I love, and Wes kind of did it. He did it without. I mean, it wasn't funny really, but with Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I mean, it is funny a little bit if you knew Wes, but like it's not like Scream. Scream, that was such a brilliant script that Kevin Williamson came up with. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever really thought. I mean, I always kind of thought I'd love to do something like that, but it's such a. It's really hard to pull off. If we are able to do a sequel to this, it's going to be even crazier meta, I think. but we'll see.
Yeah, like I said, like some of my favorite laugh out loud moments are in this movie with the meta moments. Especially there's a line about Dean Cundy in this.
He's another good friend of mine.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's a Nick. Meta moment.
That's a Nick line. Yeah. And the Leslie Kahn stuff, is so Leslie Kahn is a huge. She's like one of the biggest acting teachers out here in LA. Like, that is such an actor, like an LA insider joke, that when we're delivering pages back and forth, Luke sent me that section, and I was going through it, and I was laughing, changing things, laughing, and then the Leslie Kahn joke come up. And it was only in the script once, and I remember going, I don't know, man. I took it out, and I'm like, I don't think nobody is going to get this Leslie Kahn joke. Like, that is just for other actors. Like that thing. Like, we try to make the joke, because here's the thing: when you're doing this meta thing, especially when it's about Hollywood, you still have to make it so that people in high school drama classes can still relate to it. So, you have to understand that, like, this could be any job. It's just, there's people like this in every place you go. So I'm like, that is such a specific joke. I don't think it's going to work. He's like, okay. So I took it out, and then sent him my pages back 2 days, like, because that's how fast we're writing. Like, the next day or whatever, he sends the script back to me, and I'm going through, making notes, changes, and I look, and that joke's back, and he's added 2 more jokes about Leslie Kahn. I'm like, dude, like, what are you doubling down now? He's like, look, if we add more jokes about Leslie Kahn, then people will watch it and think it's funny because they'll not know it, but then they'll figure it out, and then they'll look her up, and then it'll be even more funny. I'm like, what are you talking about? Anyway, so we left him in there. I'm like, okay, we'll shoot it, we'll cut it out if it doesn't work. And then Bronwyn Cornelius, one of my producers, who never does horror or comedy, like she made like Clemency, she came on because she loved the script. She was like, Leslie Kahn she used to be an actor. I know Leslie. She was my acting coach. I've known her for years. I'm like, oh, would you mind? And she's like, I should see if she's okay with us doing these jokes about her. And then she let Leslie read the script. Leslie called back and said, yeah, only if you make, more fun of me. You have to, really, really dig into it. And then I said, well, can she be in it? Would she be willing to be in the movie? And she's like, well, I'll ask her. And then Leslie said yes. And then I think she steals the movie. I mean, I think her scenes with the dog, I mean, that's her real dog too, So it's like, it's hilarious. But
and like you said, it's jokes that I didn't know who she was before watching this, but as soon as she shows up on the screen, you know exactly who she is and what type of personality is. And like you said, yeah, she does steal the movie. She is so funny in this.
Oh man, it's insane. Yeah, we made hats that say "Don't mime." Like, that's one of her lines that she uses in her classes all the time. Like, I didn't write that. Like, I remember writing the script. The lines that we wrote in the script were totally different than what she ends up saying. And then it was really funny because she emailed me at one point, and she's like, hey, I just have some quick notes. She was the only one that had notes on the script. I have some notes on the script. I feel like Leslie Kahn wouldn't say this. She's like, Leslie Kahn would say this, and she would write something else in there. I'm like, okay, yeah. I mean, you know Leslie Kahn more than I do, but and then I'd write those lines in, and then And then when we're shooting on the day, she just completely threw those out too and changed it. So she pretty much improv her whole her whole thing. I think there's a couple lines in there that are hers, but yeah.
Yeah. She's incredible in this movie. And you talk about, how funny this movie is. It is a very funny, very witty, and full of meta humor. But also in the title, it is Untitled Horror Movie. You have some genuinely great scares in this movie.
Thanks.
Like when Luke shows up to Kat's house, like you said, you had to shoot between the doorway and having a glass door. I'm like, that honestly, that adds to the scares in that scene.
It did. We had to figure out, again, when you have a box that you can work with, and that's it, you figure out what you have these constraints. Like, how do I make something cool with this? Also, they're shooting themselves the whole time. So, like, Luke's holding the camera. So when he kind of comes around like that, and she's, that I'm spoiling the movie, but whatever. It was timing that out was like a very not necessarily easy thing, but like just running with himself when he's running away from the scene, he's still holding the camera himself. Nobody can be with him. So luckily, Kat's mom happened to be staying with her at the time. I shouldn't even tell the secret. It's better you don't know, but like there's a shot where it kind of goes down her hallway and finds her sleeping, and everybody's like, how did you get that shot when nobody could be around her? But Kat's mom was there with her visiting at the time, so her mom actually did that shot for us. We had to do that a few times because she's, again, not a professional camera operator either, so we end up like giving like a rig for her with this iPhone, so it's very stable.
And it looked great. She did a fantastic job for her first time running a camera.
That was probably the most takes I think we did on anything, but yeah, it was great.
Yeah. But like with all the scares though, they're immediately followed up with character stuff of them just kind of taking the piss out of every scare in the movie, which I find very humorous because, like I said, you're scared one moment and then one of the characters just says something or is just not even paying attention to what's actually going on, and it's scary. Like I said, takes the piss out of it, which is hilarious in a meta movie like this.
It does work. It works again, and I posted on my Instagram today about Larry Cohen and how he always talked about how the last 10 minutes of your movie are really the most important of the whole thing. So I think we really saved the best bits for the end of that movie, because that especially then when you even go into the credits and you see some of the outtakes and things like that. I think as a viewer, you feel like you're part of it. You were part of this experience, because we were. I mean, again, none of us. We were just at our houses with a couple lights and microphones and we shot the movie in 8 days. I mean, it's pretty insane how much attention it's gotten. When I don't think any of us thought we didn't know if it was going to come out at one point. So
what are some of the influences you had in making this movie? Like going into it, obviously this has really never been done that much before. I mean, there was like the Unfriended movies or The Den.
Yeah, the Timur Bekmambetov stuff is his, because he kind of invented that whole screen life thing with Unfriended, and then Searching is great. Searching's such a good movie. Yep. And I remember seeing I didn't see Unfriended in the theater, but I remember on HBO it was on one night and it was starting, and I was like, oh yeah, it's that weird like Skype movie. This is way before all everything. And I remember thinking, I'll try it and see how it goes and give it a few minutes and turn it off if I get bored. And all of a sudden, next thing I knew, it was like the end of the movie. Yeah. And there's something almost voyeuristic about watching those type of movies where you feel like you're in on something. You feel like you're like a third party, like tapping in on a conversation that's happening. It feels there's something interesting about it where they just fly by. Mm-hmm. I think this movie kind of does that too, where it just like it doesn't feel like you've been watching it for 87 minutes by the time you get done with it. And then Searching just did it. I mean, again, a masterful job of that film. And I just kind of never thought I wanted to make one, because I feel like I just don't know if you could pull it off, And but then we just tried it and see if we could figure it out, and did. But yeah, Searching and I think and Unfriended both were influence on it. And I also think there are a couple of TV shows that were huge influences, I think, as far as the writing went. Party Down was one of them, just about like a lot of people in the business. I don't know if you watch Party Down, which is an amazing show. Which that show's about a bunch of like people in the business that are like food caterers. I think it's on Stars. You should watch it. It's great. It's on Hulu also. And then Community. We were watching Community quite a bit too, which are those first 3 seasons of Community are so great, where they can do whole episodes of just people sitting in a conference room talking, and just the banter and how quickly it goes and how fast it is and how funny it is, you know. So those are kind of shows that were, I think, influencing on me when I was putting it together. But
yeah, I mean, now that you say Community, I'm like, oh, now I definitely see that in this movie too, especially with like how well everybody relates to each other. There's also the meta aspect in Community as
right.
well.
Oh, very much so, yeah.
Of Abed knows he's basically in a
Yes,
in a
yes,
TV
yes.
show.
Yeah.
You know, you talked about the cast earlier in this cast in this movie, like I said, is incredible. But then you have some really fun cameos at the kind of bookending the movie with Kal Penn and Aisha Tyler at the end of the movie. What was their thoughts jumping into doing a movie like this?
You know, Kal and Aisha both were awesome. I mean, they're both incredible actors. Aisha is an incredible director also. I've known Kal for 6 years now, since Girl in the Photographs, and so we've been, you know, I remember he was the first. I just said, hey, we should call Kal, see if he wants to be the agent. It's so funny because I called Kal the other day and I was like, I'm so sorry. I always, like, he's just the nicest, sweetest guy in the world. I'm like, I always cast you as like the worst human beings. Like, you're like such an asshole all the time and everything I cast you in. And I feel bad. He's like, dude, don't apologize. It's great. He's like, having those opportunities to do something that's not who I am is so great, you know? And he was hilarious. He just said yes right away. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And it took, you know, that for him, it was only like a couple hours, 3 hours of work. But he was in New York. Luke was in LA. Aisha was in LA when we shot, but we were also all over the country when we were doing these things. Claire was in Miami, you know, like everybody was in different places. And then Aisha Tyler was, I mean, amazing. We did takes that were in the script, and we did takes where she was just kind of riffing on her own, and it was so funny. She's amazing, and you know, I have so much footage of her that is just hilarious that we. You know, it'll just be on the, maybe someday we'll put out like a traditional Blu-ray with deleted scenes and things like that. Would be great.
So what's kind of been your history with horror movies? Because that's you've been your bread and butter as far as a director.
Yeah.
Is that something like you grew up with horror movies? Like,
Mhm.
did you always want to be like, that's the type of movies I want to make if I'm going to make movies?
I'm, you know, as a kid, I was obsessed with like The Thing, which I still have a original one sheet for back there. But I love The Thing. It's like one of my favorite films, probably my single favorite film of all time. Escape from New York, you know, like a lot of the earlier Carpenter stuff, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven's early stuff. Those are films I just kind of grew up, you know, loving. Halloween, all those things. And I also love, you know, like Monty Python and like different you know, humor things. So like when I think growing up as a horror fan, also I'm from South Dakota, so like, and I don't, you know, as somebody who's from there, Sioux Falls, if you're not good at like sports or you're not interested in hunting, you have like cinema and you know, like punk rock or different things like that. You have like different influences that are different things you can find to do. So I had like, you know, found my group of people, and I remember going over, we'd watch like, you know, Brain Dead and all these different random movies as we're, you know, in high school. We'd stay the night at a friend's house and just watch, you know, we'd rent VHS at the time and watch the craziest horror films we could get our hands on. And I think that was always kind of we were making movies. I was making movies in high school, you know, right out of like, God, I remember saving up money. I worked as a mall janitor at the Empire Mall just so I could save up money for like a camcorder so I could shoot little movies with my friends, you know. And God, I just found some old tapes in my parents' house recently, and like we did some really dangerous things. Like I remember like dragging people behind trucks. I mean, it was crazy. Like, what were we doing? You know, looking back now, we could have killed somebody. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
But back then, it's like you gotta make the shot. You don't have any special effects. You just gotta do it.
Like, we literally drove poor Jeff Otto behind that truck. It was crazy, but it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I have me and my cousin used to do that too. We take my parents' camcorder that they'd use for like school events and stuff, and we'd go out and we're like, we loved watching Jackass, and so we'd go out and do Jackass, you know, at 7, 8 years old, and thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, thank God that wasn't there when I was a kid, because we definitely would have killed somebody, I'm sure. You know, that's funny.
Yeah. What was really your inspiration to get into movies though? Was there something like you saw where you're like, I want to make that? Was there any like a spark that hit in you? Was it The Thing?
I mean, the Escape from New York was the film that made me want to make movies. Probably. I mean, The Thing was the first movie that just like it was just such an experience cinematically for me as a film. I think like movies. I mean, everybody loves Star Wars and those things. I'm also a big Star Trek nerd, but like I think that The Thing and Escape from New York were the two films that I actually was aware that the actors, and I was aware of a director's presence without even knowing who John Carpenter was at the time. I realized you could tell that there was like a familiar voice there doing both. So I think that, yeah, I mean, as early as I can remember, I've always kind of wanted to make movies, or playing bands, and one, they're both insanely difficult to achieve any sort of like moderate success at. And I was better at making movies than I was at playing guitar, so it worked out for me. But yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. It was just, I think it was also just to be, being naive. Like, I don't think when I moved out here, I was accepted in the American Film Institute as a director, and I felt like I should go. I had I worked in advertising and things like that before that, and I just kind of made movies with my friends. And then as I went, I always kind of thought, well, I'm gonna just do this now, and that was kind of it. And if looking back now, it's a very difficult job to keep, and to try to make a living at. Luckily I've been I haven't had this has been my job for going on 15 years now, so I've been really lucky.
Yeah, I mean, it's been incredible to watch your movies, especially like as someone from South Dakota as well. It's really like, well, if Nick can go out there to LA and do it, like it seems like that's a hometown hero type of thing for a lot of us here. So
I love to come home. That's the thing, during the pandemic, I haven't, we just saw my parents for the first time last week in 18 months. Like I haven't seen it. We were out there. We saw them in January last year, and we were planning on going last summer, and we haven't seen them so long. I usually come back to Sioux Falls 2-3 times a year, so it's just because it's home still.
Yeah.
So it's been a you look, again, it's a lot of luck, it's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of learning what you can learn, and not having really a backup plan. That's been said before by other famous people, like I think Kevin Smith or somebody says that. Don't have a backup plan, because if you have a backup plan, you'll do it. And he's totally right. Like if you have a backup plan, you come out here to do something. If like, wow, I can always go back to my job as an accountant, you're gonna go back to that job as an accountant. Yeah. So if you come out here and just, again, be naive, and that's how it works.
Yeah. You talk about, you've been in the industry now 15 years, like you said, and I mean, you're continuing to go on. Like you said, you're working with Aja on his new Amblin movie. Can we talk about that for just a little bit? I don't know how much.
A little bit. Yeah.
But the concept of that movie is insane. Like you said, it's choose your own adventure style of movie. Mm-hmm. What was it like to hear that presented to you in the first place, of doing a choose your own adventure style of movie?
So it's interesting. So like my first one was this movie called Removal that came out. It was like right after I graduated from AFI. And I worked with these two producers, Scott Silver and Chatty Matar, who I've known. We all went to school together, and they produced my first film. They've gone on to do a couple other movies. They made The Pyramid, which I was a writer on. That's how we ended up hooking up with Aja in the first place. Alex Aja was on The Pyramid as a producer. And I've just been working with those guys since we were in school together. And they kind of stopped producing traditional movies and kind of co-founded this company called Control Movie, which is basically this choose your own adventure technology that works theatrically. It works on streamers. It works anywhere. It works across all platforms. The craziest you've ever experienced. You can actually, they have a film called Late Shift. You can find in the App Store and iTunes right now. It's like they're kind of the proof of concept, and you can kind of see how it works. But you can do Late Shift in the theater, and then if you're in a theater setting, basically there's an app you would download onto your phone, and it dims your screen. It dims everything else, and then as you're watching the movie, you just vote as things pop up, and it doesn't hiccup. There's no no jarring music edits. There's no, it just seamlessly goes to the next scene. It doesn't feel real. I remember the first time I did when I was just playing the testing thing, I was like, oh, I get this up. And then it just did the next scene. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go back and do it again and completely choose different things. And it just goes to that. And it's just really crazy how amazing the technology is. And there's a couple different companies that are kind of producing stuff in it that'll probably out, I think, in the next year or two, hopefully.
Well, yeah, like you said, it feels like something that's not real, and it's kind of technology pushing.
Yeah.
But that's something you jumped into this year, doing a movie via Zoom, having no interaction in person with
it's
your cast and crew.
I always thought I was more of a traditionalist. Like I didn't really like 3D. I didn't really want to do, and then like the last two things I've been involved with have been completely brand new things that are gonna be out there. So like even like the idea of the control movie, like where you're putting the audience in the control of these decisions. And I remember thinking like, well, that feels like it takes away from you as a storyteller, but it really doesn't. It opens the world up more, and you're just giving the audience the control of the story, which is you still are directing them which way you want them to go. It's just, but there's, and in this movie specifically, it's, it ended up being like, 350 pages. The script was just so insane. Like you can do, depending on what happens in the beginning of this movie, you're going to have an entirely different first half of the second act. I mean, it could go one, you're with a totally different character. So you could see this movie multiple times and never get the same thing out of it.
What's kind of something that you see now with these trends going towards, we've seen it a lot in the last couple of years, like we said, shooting on Zoom via webcam, or now choose your own adventure. Where do you see like the future of film going? Do you think it's going to continue with some of these trends that are happening right now?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like right now, I think everybody's trying to get people back in theaters, which is where cinema still belongs. I don't care. It would have been, I think it'd been great to see Untitled Horror Movie in a theater, with a group of people, because I would love this. You can gauge if that stuff is funny when you're sitting there with an audience. You can, you as much as I hate test screenings, they're so important because you can see when you sit in the audience with an audience, and you can just feel the room when it's not working, when it is working, So I think getting people back in theaters is a really important thing. I don't know how, I think that, just trying to get back into good stories and good, entertaining movies is sort of the key. The gimmick of the choose your own adventure thing, I think, is really cool. Those movies are expensive and they're very hard to make, but I think I think it'll be really fun. And I think that's a great way to get people back in the theater too. Because it's just like the curiosity of it. Like, how is that going to work? So it's just crazy. And you get like you can get like a, result at the end of like how the audience voted, and you could have, different paths you could take, and, things like that. It's pretty impressive stuff.
People talk about the movie theater experience. I mean, like that's wholeheartedly an experience. Like you have to be in a movie theater to experience it. And it's really your own experience at that point, because you're not going to choose the same path as someone next to you, or, your girlfriend next to you, or your buddies down a couple rows. Right. It's all going to have a different movie by the end.
It's so funny because that it's like a voting system in the theater. So like when you're in a theatrical setting, it's all vote. So like if 80% of the theater picks, do the stupidest thing. And that's the thing about, like, they've done endless amounts of tests in different markets of what audiences like to do. And I know American audiences, they push it to the limit. Like American audiences 99% of the time will get the character killed, like every time, because they're just like, oh, I guess I'll jump in for the car. They'll just do, it's like Grand Theft Auto mentality, where they'll just like throw people out. It's like other countries are a little more conservative, and they'll try to actually, solve the crime or something. But it's pretty fascinating. But then they have also done like tests where they've realized that even if people aren't getting this, people tend to like seeing the thing that they didn't choose more than the thing that they did choose, which is also kind of fascinating, because I think that it's a way of connecting that there is another. I don't know. I have no idea why, but it's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like we said, like that the technology aspect of how you're doing a choose your own adventure style movie, or with Untitled Horror Movie, you're shooting something without ever interacting in person with anyone on this is just incredible. It's incredible to see how cinema is literally changing
Yeah.
before our eyes.
I don't know if I'd want to do another movie like Untitled Horror Movie, because it was, again, just a moment in time that we
Mhm.
all also, we rushed this thing through, and we finished the script and we cast it, and everybody kept on saying yes, and everything just lined up and everybody was home. We were also convinced at that moment that we had to shoot then. Otherwise, when the world reopens in July, we're not going to have these actors anymore. Like, we didn't know it was going to be a year and a half. And like, nobody, we all thought it was going to be like, I mean, it was just a full lockdown for so long, especially in Los Angeles, where like those streets were empty
Mhm.
for a long time. It was like Night of the Comet, if you remember that movie.
Yeah.
It was just very empty the whole time.
And yeah, I mean, you show that in the movie too when Luke's driving down the road.
Yeah.
Like, it
Yeah.
shocked me to see that, just having him flip the cam. It's only a quick second too. It's like, oh my god, there's
Yeah,
zero traffic in Los
he's in like,
Angeles.
that's like Sunset Boulevard. He's in West Hollywood
Yeah.
when he's driving down the road there too, which is crazy. Like, that is insane. Like, nobody was out.
So you said, you have ideas for doing a sequel to this movie, but you also just said you wouldn't shoot anything like this again. Would
I
we
wouldn't
see
shoot
more
it
of
in like, we weren't in person again. The
Okay.
sequel ideas right now are like, we would all be like, it would be more of a traditional movie, but it would also be like a meta take on the that too. So, knock on wood that we get to make it.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
completely depends on how this one does. I feel like just in horror and horror comedies, especially too, I feel like, you brought up, well, not mentioning COVID and not mentioning, um, being in lockdown and things like that. And I think that was always, our plan, never to bring it up. And I think that now, coming out of a pandemic, I feel like horror in general needs to be, I mean, will be more fun. I think this is a fun movie. And that was always our kind of goal, was to like let people forget about how awful everything is for 87 minutes and just like laugh and try to have a good time. Maybe get scared. I don't know. And I feel like, as much as I love, like, I call them trauma horror, like the art, more arty horror films that were coming up before, they're very dread, like, they have a kind of a sense of dread over them, where you're like, like, I don't know if I want to see, at least for me, in the horror world, like any heavy, depressing films coming out of that. You kind of want, what Blumhouse is doing right now, for example, is with um, and what we just try to do, and it's kind of a Shaun of the Dead kind of film is what I'd probably prefer, but.
So since you mentioned, Shaun of the Dead and some other, Night of the Comet, other horror movies, what would you pair with this movie for a double feature if you're going to sit
Oh,
a
man.
group of friends together and watch Untitled Horror Movie and blank?
I mean, look, if it was at the New Beverly Theater, that's Tarantino's theater,
Mhm.
I would love to have a Scream and Untitled Horror Movie night. It would be amazing. I mean, gosh, I don't know. You could do, I don't know. I haven't even thought about that. That's a good question. That's a really good question. I don't know. Let me think about that. Scream's the person that pops in my head just because of the meta style of it, and that they're just different films. But
the one that came to my mind is also a Scream movie. Scream 3 is kind of the one I was thinking of, because it has a Hollywood aspect
to it too, yeah,
as well, with a little couple of actors that are a little stuck up in their ways and stuff. Like, I think that would pair very well with this.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that's yeah, that would work too. Scream 3 would be good with it. Or you could go, like Waiting for Guffman thing. You can do one of those Chris Guest movies, would work too. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can go with this one, because like we've talked about, you play a lot on the comedy. There is a lot of horror in this as well, and meta stuff going on. So I think it does pair well with really anything in either horror or comedy, because it does those both so well, and it pairs so well together with both of those.
Thank you, seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, let's kind of jump into like where people can find this. It is streaming on VOD right now.
It's on iTunes, Amazon, Vudu. I mean, all the VOD platforms basically. I think it's like $9.99 to buy and like $5 to rent, I think. And then that's pretty much the only place you can get it right now. It's just on PVOD. But that's, I mean, look, I mean, it's we've talked about doing like a special edition Blu-ray with a bunch of stuff on it later. I don't know if that'll happen, like, because they just don't, I love them. I have a wall of movies still, but like I'm a physical media nerd, but the market doesn't really warrant it a lot of times. So they try to, if we do it, it might be like a limited edition, 500 or something, just to press them and go out. But like, so that would be great. But I don't know if they're gonna do it or not. But
last thing I do want to touch on, just because obviously you're from South Dakota, I live in South Dakota. We have SuperCon 2021 coming up. You're going to be a guest there.
I am,
which I believe for the first time at SuperCon.
I was a guest last year too. I did it was all
the virtual one.
Yeah, I was supposed to be. We were supposed to go last year for it. And then we were doing the virtual con, and we had just finished shooting. We had just finished editing this movie when last year's virtual con was happening. So we had just finished the cut, and we were still in mixing and music and things like that. And I had for my virtual interview, I brought on Luke and Tim Granaderos to do it with me. So it was kind of funny. So we talked about this movie that nobody had seen and nobody knew what we were talking about. We're like, yeah, it was great. We all had to film ourselves, and everybody was like, oh, okay, cool. You shot it on iPhones? We're like, yeah, it's great. And everybody's like, yeah. but because you wouldn't know that it would look as good as it does. I don't think you would even think it. I don't think anybody even really understands that it was shot, on iPhones. But yeah, it was really funny. I'm very excited to come to SuperCon, and yeah, I'm stoked. Just any chance to go home anyway. But there's just so many things that whole weekend that I'm part of a film thing, and I'm part of. But you guys are doing that, and I think I'm doing like a live Dungeons and Dragons thing, which is gonna be kind of fun.
That's awesome.
I have a couple. That was another thing that in pandemic that happened. I ended up getting in a couple random Dungeons and Dragons games I haven't played since like high school. But I played it in one game. I played with like a bunch of like Travis Stevens and like a bunch of like actors and producers and like other people who've done like, he just made Jacob's Wife, and he's produced like amazing movies. And so we have this like D&D group that we have like a bunch of us have started playing. And so that'll be kind of fun too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited to hear that you're doing something like that too, because I love SuperCon. It's an awesome event that we get to have here, and I'm stoked that you're gonna be there in person this year. That's gonna be a blast.
Man, where was all that stuff when I was living in Sioux Falls? Like, none of that happened. None of that existed. Like, there was nothing like that there. Yeah, it's great. So, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. I'm glad we get to have stuff like that now in Sioux Falls. Yeah, it's starting to grow and get some cool events like that coming up. And very excited for people to check this out too, because last night in our little backlot 605 little group, I was gushing about it and saying like, guys, you need to check this out.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you.
Like, I can't wait to hear all of their thoughts on this, and everyone else too. I would love to hear what.
Like the reviews have been really good. We've gotten some great reviews. A lot of fans have really liked it. I think we're at like a 95% for audience score, which is great. Again, we had no idea. There was no test audience. I sent it to a couple people earlier cuts and to see if they liked it, but you never know if that works, because you also don't know if they're going to tell you the truth, so you're like, oh yeah, it was great, and we're like, I really don't need to hear that. Like, tell me what works, doesn't work, because that's kind of what we're trying to figure out. And they're like, no, it's really funny. And then we're like, okay. So we had no idea. And then when some of the reviews started coming in, interesting enough, even our bad reviews have been like kind of good reviews. They weren't like they weren't like the worst reviews I've ever. Like, the bad ones are still like, well, it's just not scary, and you're like, okay, horror blog 99 or whatever, like they don't think it's scary, but whatever, it's I don't think it's scary, so I agree with you. It's more of a comedy, but it's been it feels like this has been a very overwhelmingly positive thing, and I couldn't be more excited about it.
So. One review I saw called it a comfort horror movie. I'm like, that's the perfect description for this movie. I loved it.
It is. That's so great, actually. That totally, that makes total sense, actually. Yeah.
Yes. So again, everyone out there listening, go definitely check it out. Rent it, buy it on VOD, iTunes, Vudu, YouTube, all those good places.
Yeah, YouTube too. Yeah. Yeah.
So Nick, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll see you in October.
Yes, I was just going to say, I can't wait to meet you in person, get to chat some more horror movies come October.
We'll have some surprises too.
Once again, huge thank you to Nick Simon for joining us on this episode to talk about Untitled Horror Movie, again streaming pretty much wherever you can buy or rent your movies online, so definitely go check it out. And as Nick teased there, we do have a few things brewing for SuperCon coming up in October, but we can't talk about those yet. So I guess until next time, we'll see ya on the backlot of South Dakota.